There are secrets not written in books. There are destinies that begin with a sob by the river, and there are children. Not entirely of this world. Once upon a time, in a community of African American descent called Zimbali, nestled between ancient forests and the sacred Oriya River, where the land sang with the sound of drums and the wind breathed with the prayers of ancestors. There lived an elderly couple named Oba and Nalia, renowned for their kindness and healing with herbs. Yet there was one thing they could not heal: the pain of childlessness. For 18 years, Nalia lit incense and prayed, offering sweet cassava and roosters to the spirits. On a night when the moon glowed red as blood, she collapsed by the Oriya River, her tears mingling with the river's waters. And from within a silvery mist, a woman appeared, draped in a shimmering blue silver cloak like the scales of a fish. She handed Nalia a necklace woven from the silk of ancient water dragons and spoke in a voice that resonated like water flowing through a seashell. A child will come, but it will not be solely of humankind. It is a bridge, the fragile boundary between land and water. Keep it a secret, or lose everything. When the sun rose behind the ancient oil trees, the first rays of light spilled onto the thatched roof of Oba's house like a silent confirmation from the universe. A miracle had begun. Nalia, the woman who had once wept dry her tears by the Oriya River, was now carrying a life within her, warm, healthy, and filled with wonders no words could fully capture. 9 months later, amidst the roar of thunder and a faint rainbow glimmering on the horizon, a baby girl was born. They named her Ramy, a name as soft as the breeze, yet resonant like the spirit rising from the depths of the sacred river. The child had deep turquoise eyes, as if they held a sealed ocean within. Her hair was sleek and black, but strangely, when moonlight touched it, it shimmered with a golden hue, like the silk of fossilized sunlight. The villagers gathered, praising and calling it a sign of ancestral blessing. They did not know it was not merely a gift, it was also a warning. On the first full moon nights, when the village slumbered beneath the baobab trees, Ramy, then only an infant, would suddenly sit upright, her eyes wide open as if answering a distant call. Oba noticed it first, and then, together, they witnessed an unimaginable sight. Ramy's tiny feet began to melt away. No pain, no tears. The transformation unfolded gently, like a dream, yet utterly overwhelming. Her skin gleamed like metal, her legs retracted, and in their place emerged a tail covered in golden scales that sparkled as if forged from the purest moonlight. She slithered from her bed, light as a wisp of smoke. Through the slightly ajar door, Ramy glided along the narrow dirt path leading to the Oriya River. Nalia followed, her heart pounding but her feet rooted to the ground in awe and fear. From where she stood, the moonlight filtered through the leaves, clearly illuminating her daughter's wondrous form. Ramy touched the water and without hesitation, she slipped into the Oriya River as if returning to a familiar place from a past life. The water did not ripple. It embraced her like a mother. Oba placed a trembling hand on his wife's shoulder. "We have been blessed, but is it a blessing or a trial?" From that night on, they never slept deeply during full moons. And deep in their hearts, they knew this child was not only theirs. She belonged to both the moonlight and the river. But what would happen? If one day this secret were exposed to the light, the villagers called it a sign of blessing. But Oba and Nalia knew the truth. Ramy was not merely human. On every full moon night, she left her bed unconsciously, her legs transforming into a magnificent golden-scaled tail as if forged by light. And then she slipped into the Oriya River, where the water lay still as a mirror. Ramy grew up between two worlds, one that everyone saw and one known only to her and her parents. By day, she was a bright, agile girl who always knew how to warm people's hearts. She, along with Keela and Mira, her two closest friends, grew up like three sprouts from the same root, sharing a single noodle, braiding each other's hair under the baobab tree, helping the elderly women peel ginger, and laughing uncontrollably when teased about matchmaking by the village aunties. Ramy was skilled at hiding herself. She never once let her difference slip. She avoided bathing in the rain, claiming she'd catch a cold. She refused to go swimming, joking that her hair would tangle like a haystack when wet. And no one suspected a thing because Ramy always had a convincing smile. But as she grew older, the weight of her secret pressed heavier on her small shoulders. The full moon night still came regularly, like an invisible reminder that she was not entirely part of this world. When the moonlight touched her, her body transformed. The radiant golden tail reappeared, pulling her to the river like a gateway back to her origins. She never told anyone, not out of fear of being hated, but out of fear that if someone knew, everything she had built, friendships, family, trust, would collapse in an instant, that people would no longer look at her with the warmth they once did. At 17, when Keela began receiving love letters sealed with cola nut shells, and Mira daydreamed endlessly about a wedding with jangling drums and red flower garlands, Ramy sat by their side, smiling softly. She nodded, teased, and congratulated her friends. But in her heart, each smile was a silent knife slicing into her soul. Because Ramy, too, wanted to love. She wanted someone to call her name in a crowd with a voice meant only for her. She wanted to hold hands, to be heard, to feel that she mattered, but to love meant daring to be seen. And Ramy knew, if someone truly saw her true self, with her golden-scaled tail, with blood that didn't belong solely to the land, would they be able to accept her? Because to love is to offer oneself like an unwrapped gift, to let another see the parts we fear most. And Ramy had never been ready to do that. But there would come a day when her heart could no longer bear the weight. And when that time came, what would break first, the secret or her faith? Yet Ramy never swam, staying far from the river and even refusing to stand in the rain. "My hair gets annoyingly curly when wet," she'd joke. But the truth was, if water touched her skin before the moon had set, she might transform. She lived two lives, one as the village girl, cheerful, lively, the other as an ancient creature under the moonlight, a mermaid bearing both a curse and a gift. And this is not just a fairy tale, but a journey to rediscover oneself between what we are born as and what we yearn to become. Can a golden-scaled mermaid be loved as an ordinary person? Can love be strong enough to save a cursed secret? All right, my dear audience, get ready for a story that will leave you in awe. Take a second to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below to let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always exciting to see someone joining us from all corners of the world. 17 came to Ramy not as a clear milestone, but through subtle changes. The different glances from the boys in the village, the excited whispers behind her back, and the longer afternoons when Keela and Mira began to talk about love. Keela started receiving visits from suitors at her doorstep. Mira became enchanted with the vibrant red fabrics displayed at the market, preparing for the wedding season. They laughed, teased and shared stories of their dream weddings, filled with the resounding beat of jangling drums, red flower garlands woven through their hair, and the gaze of someone waiting at the end of the aisle. Ramy listened, smiled softly, and cheered them on. But inside, each word was like a drop of water falling into an already full cup, silently causing it to crack. She, too, wanted to love, even just once. She wanted someone to call her name in a crowd with a familiar voice, a gaze that followed her on weary days. She wanted to feel a hand clasp hers tightly, not to pull her away, but to hold her close. She yearned for the small things that others seemed to have so easily, but to love meant opening her heart. And opening her heart meant risking everything. Because love cannot exist in the shadow of a secret. Every time she thought of someone truly knowing who she was, or rather, what she was, Ramy felt a chill run down her spine. Who would love someone who couldn't step into water? Who would accept a girl who, on every full moon night, transformed into a creature of fairy tales, with a radiant golden-scaled tail and eyes no longer human? She didn't know. And that uncertainty paralyzed every hope. Some nights, Ramy stood before the mirror, staring at herself for a long time. She touched her neck, where the old necklace, a gift from the mysterious woman years ago, was hidden in her mother's woven cloth. She wondered if she took it off, if she let herself love truly, what would happen first? Would she be saved, or would she be cursed? In a village where everyone knew each other, where every laugh and every glance held meaning, Ramy knew one slip and everything could collapse. And so she chose silence. She kept smiling, kept joking, kept pretending that her heart didn't long to reach out to someone with her true self. Ramy stepped into adulthood as if the light within her knew how to grow on its own. Without embellishment, without effort, she still shone in her own way. Her dark skin, like cocoa beans roasted to perfection, glowed under the afternoon sun as if touched by the divine. Her thick, lightly curled hair framed her soft, oval face, but it was her eyes that made people linger. A pair of eyes as deep as obsidian polished at the river's depths, holding undercurrents that could only be felt, not named. When Ramy passed by, the old women paused their washing, the children stopped running. The young men pretended to break branches, carry water or adjust their belts, just to steal one more glance at her. She didn't need to speak to draw attention. Her silence was the loudest sound of all. Naturally, proposals soon followed. Young warriors, those who had felled the first antelope of the season. Blacksmiths, with calloused hands and hearts as fiery as their forges. The drummer, who could breathe soul into melodies and believed he could make her heart skip a beat with his rhythms. But none succeeded. Ramy turned them down, one by one, not coldly, not distantly, just a gentle look, a soft word of thanks. And that was enough to make them feel respected, yet unable to step closer. Mira or Keela would tease, "How long are you going to keep saying no?" waiting for someone to step out of a legend. Ramy would only smile, her shoulders shaking lightly, but in her heart beat a different drum, a rhythm of nameless fear. Because the truth was, she wasn't afraid of loneliness. She was afraid of someone loving her without truly knowing who she was. She feared she would have to choose between being loved as an ordinary human or living authentically and facing eyes that turned away. For who could teach her how to live with two selves? How could a heart remain whole when it was constantly divided? Each night, as she removed the necklace and placed it by her pillow, Ramy would gaze at the ceiling where moonlight slipped through a small hole. She wondered, if one day someone truly came close, which part of herself would she let them touch? The human or the magic? He didn't come with the sound of drums, not with fierce looks or promises of a golden future. Femi, the young man from the neighbouring village, appeared like a breeze slipping through a door's crack, unannounced, unassuming, yet making the room feel different. He was a woodcarver, calloused hands, lean frame, eyes as deep as old logs telling stories. In a world where men like to roar and prove themselves, Femi was quiet, as if his presence didn't need anyone's acknowledgement. But it was his silence, his way of not intruding, that made people take notice. Ramy began to notice him not because of a single word, but because of the silences he inhabited. He was always there when she least expected. Under the shade of a tree, at the evening market, on the edge of a festival, never too close, never too far, always just enough for her to know she was being seen, but not watched. Once, while Ramy was carrying water from the well, a strong gust of wind whipped up dust, making her stumble. The carrying pole slipped from her shoulder, but before the bucket spilled, a steady hand caught them. It was Femi. No lengthy pleasantries. He simply looked at her, gently lifted the pole back onto her shoulder, and said in a voice as low as the earth, "Small shoulders. Don't need to carry the whole world." The words were light as air, but they left a smouldering mark on her heart, not because of chivalry, but because, for the first time, someone saw the invisible weight she always carried. From then on, she began to notice that Femi never demanded. He only gave. He didn't ask questions, nor did he seek reciprocation. When she forgot her bundle of cloth at the market, Femi quietly left it on her doorstep. When the weather turned cold, he hung a bundle of dry firewood under her eaves. When she said nothing, he said nothing. He was simply there, like the ground, unremarkable, yet the only thing that could hold you up. And then, somehow, Ramy's heart began to tilt toward the space where his shadow fell. But the more it tilted, the more she feared, because she knew love wasn't just beautiful moments. It was an invitation to step into each other's true worlds. And her world held something no one had ever touched. Ramy built a wall with gentle glances and soft words. She didn't push Femi away, but she didn't let him come closer. She showed him who she was, or at least the part she wanted to show. Femi didn't try to break through. He simply waited, not with impatience, but with quiet faith. Because sometimes loving isn't about doing everything to be loved in return. It's about staying still until the other feels safe enough to open the door. But love, no matter how gentle, is like moonlight, and moonlight always finds a way to illuminate what's most deeply hidden. That night, the sky was strangely calm. The wind seemed to hold its breath. The trees stood silent as if waiting for something beyond the ordinary. The full moon hung high like a gentle eye, casting light into every hidden corner of Zimbali village. Femi hadn't meant to pass by Ramy's house, but his feet, as if guided by a will of their own, brought him to her doorstep unannounced. He didn't knock. He didn't speak. He just stood there, as he always did, as if his quiet presence could warm the air between them. And then he saw her step out, Moonlight slid along Ramy's spine, spilling over her hair, casting a shadow that was no longer entirely human. She didn't know someone was watching. Her bare feet softly pressed into the damp earth, drawn forward as if by an invisible force. Then, something happened that stole every breath from Femi's body. Ramy's feet began to fade, like mist, like light bent out of shape. In an instant, her skin shimmered with a golden hue that even the sun could not create. Scales gleamed one by one, curling, lengthening, until a radiant golden tail emerged. Soft, brilliant, mystical, like an ancient secret rising from the river's depths. She didn't look back. She only glided toward the Oriya river, as if called by the deepest essence within her. Femi stood frozen, his entire body still, not from fear, but because he was witnessing something no language could name, a majestic sacred beauty that didn't belong to the world he lived in, yet was the very girl he had always turned toward. When Ramy reached the water's edge, she paused. As if sensing something, she turned her head, and then her eyes met his, the one person who shouldn't have seen, but also the only one she didn't want to deceive. The moonlight illuminated her face, no panic, no tears, only a gentle weariness, as if she had finally stopped hiding. "I am a part of the water," she said. Her voice was like waves breaking inside a seashell. "And I am not worthy of love." Femi didn't move. Then he stepped toward her, one step at a time, slow but certain, as if walking the line between reality and dream. "You're not worthy of love because you're like everyone else," he replied, his voice hoarse with emotion. "You're worthy because you're you." He approached the water's edge, his knees bent to the ground. His eyes, deep and steadfast, looked at her without blinking. "You are moonlight on the river, something this world rarely sees, and I see you completely." Ramy didn't respond, but in that moment, her eyes, carrying the turquoise of the deep sea, shone with a light that was no longer a secret. It was the light of a heart touched, in the right place, at the right time. The morning after, the first sunlight filtered through the leaves like gentle fingers stirring the world awake. Ramy sat by the fire, her eyes no longer evading. She had made her decision. Last night, the moonlight had not only unveiled her secret, it had also illuminated a hidden corner deep within her heart, the longing to live authentically. She told them everything, every detail, about the moonlight, about the golden scaled tail, about Femi, about the way his gaze didn't waver when he saw what she herself dared not linger on. Oba sat in silence, his expression pensive. Nalia clutched the woven cloth in her hands, smoothing its folds as if listening with every sense. After a long pause, she spoke, her voice low and serene, like the river's surface on a windless day. "My daughter, if he knows the truth and still loves you, then he has crossed a fear that your parents never dared to face in a lifetime." Those words were not permission. They were liberation, for all three of them. That afternoon, Femi came. He brought no drums, no ostentatious gifts, just himself, with rough wooden hands, eyes as deep as roots, and a heart no longer waiting in silence. Femi knelt in the earthen courtyard, where the late afternoon sun gilded every speck of dust. No grand words were needed. He opened his hand. No ring, just a small piece of wood, carved with waves embracing the moon, a symbol of things imperfect, but intertwined, Ramy cried. Not out of surprise, not out of fear, but because for the first time in her life she was chosen, seen, loved, holy, even when the truth was as bare as moonlight on the river's surface. When the full moon reached its zenith, the Oriya River ceased to be merely a river. It became a sanctuary. No bell towers, no domes, only shimmering waters breathing in harmony with the moon and the ancient drum beats rising from the weathered heart of Oba. No one in Zimbali village had ever witnessed such a ceremony. No vibrant wedding flowers, no veils to cover the face, only light of the moon, of faith, and of a miracle yet to be named. Ramy appeared, draped in a simple indigo dress, her bare feet touching the earth, her head held high. Keela and Mira walked beside her, their dresses adorned with riverbank glass beads, holding bundles of fragrant herbs. They neither cried nor laughed, but shone like two pillars of light guiding the way. Oba beat the drum, leading his daughter to the river's edge. Each beat was a pang in his heart, but also a silent blessing. For his daughter, and for the man who dared to love her truth. The villagers stood on either side. No one mocked, no one turned away, for the moonlight did not permit deceit, nor did the Oriya. Ramy paused, removing the necklace from her chest, clutching it gently before placing it back on, as if choosing herself. Then she stepped into the water. No trembling, no hesitation. Her skin touched the water. And the miracle unfolded, not in silence for the first time, but before eyes no longer filled with fear. The golden tail, as if woven from moonlight, emerged, soft yet majestic. Each scale gleamed like the wind singing over waves. No one fled, no one gasped. They simply stood there, witnessing what their ancestors had whispered of. The child of the water had finally returned. Femi stepped out from the circle, moving toward the river, unhurried, unobtrusive. He waded into the water as if born to do so, to be by her side. No vows were needed, no oaths spoken. Only that gaze, gentle, steadfast, and true. He touched Ramy's cheek, wiping away a droplet that might have been river water or a tear. They stood in the current where the full moon's reflection gleamed like an open gateway between two worlds. And there, without words, a wedding took place, between land and water, between human and what was never meant to be believed. Later, people would say that the Oriya River sang all night, as if the river itself gave its blessing. And Ramy, the golden-scaled mermaid, was no longer a legend. She was a wife, a daughter, a bridge between things that seemed impossible to touch. Her home was not at the river's depths or on a high hill. Her home was where someone waited for her to return, with all that she was. But perhaps the Oriya River still held one final secret, waiting for another full moon night to tell. That night, the wind fell silent, as if listening. The waters of the Oriya River rippled gently, like a final blessing for a girl who had once lived two lives. And Ramy, the golden-scaled mermaid, finally didn't have to choose which side to belong to. She became a symbol of the impossible, that love doesn't demand sameness, but dares to touch the deepest truths of one another. What do we learn from this story? That each of us carries a piece of golden scales, a secret, a fear of rejection, a part of ourselves we haven't dared to reveal in the light. But true love, as Femi showed, is when someone dares to look at those parts and still chooses to stay. Not because the other is perfect, but because they are real. Perhaps, in today's modern world, where everything is filtered through masks, what we need most isn't to become normal, but to find someone who makes us believe we no longer need to hide. Ramy's story isn't over, because the moon still waxes full, the oriya still flows, and somewhere, another child is dreaming of water speaking to them. If this story has touched your heart, leave a comment, share your thoughts about Ramy, about love, or simply about a story you've kept hidden. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this video if you believe someone out there needs to hear this. Do you want a part 2? A continuation, where greater challenges await Ramy? If so, leave the oriya hasn't slept in the comments to let me know you're ready. See you again, those who believe in the miraculous.